dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I remain your host, Mark Angelides, and we're continuing our conversation on political philosophies and different elements within that with Liberty Nation senior political analyst and longtime host of this here radio show, Mr. Tim Donner. Thanks for sticking around, Tim.
Always fun to talk with you, Mark.
So I want to go a bit, I won't say left field, all right, let's go outfield on this. And I want to talk about the idea of political entrepreneurs. And this ties in quite well with what we've talked about earlier in the show. And to me, a political entrepreneur is somebody who, let's say there's a whole range of tick boxes that you have to do to become a successful politician within Western liberal democracies. Now, I'm talking just general ones, not the, you got to be female, you got to be black, and then you can get on the Supreme Court. Not like that, but or Joe Biden's vice president. But, there are certain things that's expected of our politicians, which is why we always hear this this trumpet call about how he doesn't have the experience or she was the most qualified candidate ever, because we allegedly expect certain qualifications, history, that kind of stuff. But there are a couple of figures that I think that have broken that particular system, and they've created their own political marketplaces by being as individualistic as possible, and yet they've kind of stuck. Now we see it a lot of people, the guy who promised 2 mules for everybody and has ran in every presidential election for the last 30 years.
40 acres and a mule.
40 acres and a mule. So there's a lot of people who have their own brand, but they don't make it into the big marketplace of politics. And yet you have people like Donald Trump and Nigel Farage on the other side of the Atlantic. And these people are already charting their own courses. And I wonder if there's a recipe behind what they're doing that others would seek to emulate.
I don't think there's a recipe, which is why it would be an entrepreneurial enterprise for a lot of these people to come into the political process. Donald Trump broke every political norm. I mean, by all accounts, viewed through a traditional political lens, he should have lost about 40 to 45 states to Hillary Clinton, who checked every single box of the traditional metrics that one, expects from a presidential candidate, other than the fact she wasn't black. That was about the only box that she didn't check. And yet she lost reasonably decisively to a guy who so many Americans thought he had no business running for president, not to mention being president. But I think what he did was not necessarily create MAGA as a permanent political brand, so much as to say you can win and you can appeal to people by breaking the mold. Now, I think there's a couple of other people who fall into this class. A 29-year-old bartender from Queens has become one of the most popular figures in the Democratic Party, to the point that she's being discussed as a Senate candidate in 2028, perhaps even a presidential candidate in 28 or beyond.
I'm going to push back on you just a fraction there, because we're talking about
Alexandria
Schumer, of course, being the barmaid. No, yes, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But she's not. It's not as though she was a wildfire in and of herself. She was picked by the Justice Democrats, which is a very powerful group. There's a lot of funding behind her. She had the Democratic Socialists of America behind her as well, and she was a candidate for them before she became a candidate for office. And so I'm not sure if I would class her in the same thing. But please make your case. Okay.
Well, there were a lot of people that wanted Donald Trump to run for office too. Probably a lot more that didn't.
Yeah, but not as a Republican.
In the Republican Party.
Yeah.
But look, he came in and single-handedly reversed the branding of the parties.
Mm.
You think about it. For as long as we could remember before 2016, the Republicans were the party of the rich, the party of corporations,
Yeah.
and the party of well-heeled white people. It's now reversed. After a decade of Trump, the Republicans have now become the party of the working class, and the Democrats have become the party of the rich elites. Now, we've seen these kind of switches before, like in the early 60s when the Civil Rights Law was passed. Suddenly, the solid South turned from solid Democrat to solid Republican because of civil rights provisions. And that flipped the sort of electoral narrative, shall we say, the electoral map. It flipped it. So it really is a matter of not so much what the movement is, as much as it is in the case of Trump or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Zoran Mamdani, the mayor-elect of New York, that you can win by doing things you're not supposed to be able to do and win, like calling yourself a democratic socialist, or like AOC being, shall we say, not the most knowledgeable person when it comes to history and politics, and yet she created a brand. I think what all of this has done is said that traditional politics is pretty much out the window because MAGA has taken over the Republican Party and left-wing socialism has become the dominant driving force in the Democratic Party.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's very rare in history when there's such a, obviously not unprecedented by a long shot, but it's rare when you can actually see two parties, the two dominant parties, the two prime spheres of influence, almost change what they are.
Yes.
But we're actually watching it in real time, aren't we? Because
Yes.
the Republicans, it is the MAGA is the Republican Party now, and woe betide anybody who runs on a George W. Bush style ticket in 2028. These I don't think these gentlemen or ladies will make it through the anywhere near to the top of the primaries. And then, of course, with the Democrats, they're wrestling. The Democratic Party is wrestling right now with should they try and emulate the success to hold on to power at the cost of their blue dog Democrat base, which now I see a lot of this is why Trump won, I guess. A lot of the blue dog Democrats they switched to Donald Trump after the Joe Biden Kamala Harris debacle. And so we're seeing that right now. It's a battle for the soul of the Democratic Party. And I think the Democratic socialist wing of the party, the more what we would now consider far left side of the party, I think they're going to win because they have been winning in races and they've been winning by a lot. Now, it was no surprise that a Democrat would win the New York City mayoralty election, but over 1 million votes cast just for that candidate. That's energy. And a party that wants to survive, it has to choose whether they're going to keep their core principles or opt for power and then hope they can get back to their principles later on. And I suspect it's the latter. What do you think?
Well, I think we saw in almost exact terms in the personification of the three major races that we saw here in 2025. You saw two relative moderates, traditional liberals, winning the gubernatorial races in New Jersey with Jackie Sherrill and in Virginia with Mikey Sherrill. Did I say Jackie?
Yes.
I think that was an athlete.
There you go.
Some kind of, I don't remember. Anyway, and then Abigail Spanberger in Virginia. These are the kind of Democrats that the general consensus says these are the type of Democrats that can win, to talk about core issues, as opposed to Zoran Mamdani, who went as far left as you could possibly go in winning the race in New York City, which, of course, is, other than Seattle, probably the most Democratic city, the most liberal, the most leftist city in the country. So they have a real reckoning. And what it's going to take for the Democrats to figure it out is probably a figure like a Bill Clinton who can come in and say, look, we lost to Trump twice, and shame on us because we couldn't figure him out. We didn't try to figure him out. And we need to go back to the point where we're starting to appeal to the working class again, instead of talking about climate change and transgenderism and open borders and all of this crazy left-wing stuff that people don't care about. And one thing that Zoran Mamdani did to bring ironically, to bring the party kind of back to reality is that he appealed to the affordability issue. And I think, if I was Mamdani right now, I would get out there and say, look how prescient I was by talking about affordability and winning the New York City mayoral race, because no less than President Trump has now pivoted to an affordability agenda. So I think Mamdani hit on something, even though his solutions for affordability are going to prove to be disastrous if history is any guide at all. But it also means Trump knows that over the next year, the economy better improve the way that he projects it to improve if he hopes to have the House stave off losing control to the Democrats in 2026.
We're going to continue the conversation about whether socialism can get a foothold in a nominally democratic constitutional republic after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.